Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business. Joining me today is Dan Kelly, President and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for joining us again today, Dan.
Happy to be with you.
Well, we're into well over, not just over a year of this pandemic. Can you just maybe give me a lay of the land, so to speak, for small businesses right now? One year plus later, no end in sight. What is the mood out there in the small business community?
Well, look, there have been glimmers of optimism over the last several weeks and months, but a whole bunch of negatives that have happened as well along the way. And most notably, of course, the resurgence of business lockdowns, not just in Ontario that has been lockdown happy and has used them for crazy numbers of days. In fact, just this week, many businesses in the Toronto area have been locked down for 340 days, the longest lockdowns in North America. But it's not just Ontario right now. We have new fresh lockdowns in Alberta, in Manitoba, in Nova Scotia, even British Columbia that has done, I think, reasonably well in keeping its business community open. They have announced some further business closures. Right now, across Canada, fewer than 50% of small businesses are even fully open. That's how serious this is. I mean, gosh, it is 14 months into the pandemic. Many businesses have not had a normal month through the whole process. A little bit of a return perhaps in the summer of last year, but it has been shaky, and it's driving many to question the future viability of their businesses. We've already seen about 60,000 businesses bite the dust already, and we at CFIB, as you know, are projecting a further 180,000 business failures before this is over. With the third wave and all the new restrictions, that could go higher.
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me, and I recently talked to your colleague out here, Annie Dormuth, who runs the Alberta CFIB operation, so to speak. But we're talking about the debt load of these businesses, and I think in general, in Alberta was it 170,000?
That's the national number, $170,000 in additional debt, and it's fairly consistent by province. That's new COVID-related debt, not debt that the businesses just picked up for other purposes, but that's a real stranglehold on these businesses.
Well, I found stunning and staggering was the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry in Alberta, the average debt load was over 300,000, which is, I didn't even know how businesses can survive with that.
No, and in fact, when we did the analysis of how long they expect them to be able to repay that until their revenues essentially return to normal, they're projecting out 8 years from now before the restaurant industry will fully recover from the damage that it has sustained during COVID. It has been among the hardest hit. For goodness sakes, I was just interviewed by the BBC yesterday, because we've been saying, and rightly so, that Toronto's lockdowns have been the longest in North America. In fact, the big question is that we may have had some of the longest lockdowns in the world in Canada. And that's a real shame. Look, we've got to take COVID seriously. Business owners, yes, there are some that are suggesting that we rip away every restriction and just become Texas tomorrow. There are other business owners who feel like the lockdowns haven't been tight enough, and that's the reason that we keep getting back into trouble. But the majority of business owners understand that there need to be restrictions, are supportive of some limitations on business activity to ensure that social distancing can be maintained. But they want to make sure that their governments are using them in reasonable weight so that they still have a heartbeat of economic activity. And then where businesses can't make an income because of the government-imposed restrictions, that's when we need provincial and the federal government to step up and actually provide proper subsidization of the business community. These aren't businesses that are failing because they've made bad decisions. They're poorly run. They've chosen the wrong location. These are businesses that would otherwise be successful, except for the societal need for them to be closed at the moment, imposed by government. And as a result of that, it's, I think, an obligation of the government to ensure that these businesses are fully funded until such time as their operations can return to normal.
Yeah. I think a lot of let's take the case of Alberta, for instance, right? A lot, deals with the uncertainty out there, right? And you know, a few weeks back, the government shut down, in dining, right? Dining in restaurants and cafes, etc., and then encouraged, so to speak, encouraged the patio scene. So people put out their patio stuff, buy picnic tables, buy heaters, umbrellas, et cetera. And then boom, they make that investment. Now they're shut down again for patio. So that uncertainty doesn't help, does it?
It sure doesn't. And of course, as you rightly pointed out, businesses have not only just lost money, but made investments in other areas in order to try to stay afloat, only to have those avenues then removed from their toolkit. So it's a real struggle. I mean, the costs that some businesses have been spending on PPE alone are enormous. We've had gym owners that have said when they have been allowed to open that they're spending $2,000 a month
Wow.
in additional sanitation procedures and equipment.
Yeah.
That's a real cost. And I got to tell you, I mean, this is killing businesses. So we've got lower revenues, some of them down 90%, and higher costs for many, many things. And that, yes, there have been some helpful subsidy programs, the rent subsidy, the wage subsidy, the CEBA loan program. We've spoken
Yeah.
about those over the past months. But there are still thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of businesses that have received nothing or are receiving a trickle of subsidization relative to the amount of losses that they are experiencing.
Okay. Vaccines, obviously it's the the solution. So out there. That what are your thoughts on that, and what are the CFIB thoughts on the rollout of the vaccines across the country, and how that's faring?
Well, look, like other Canadians, it has been agonizingly, we see it as being agonizingly slow. Vaccines, of course, needed to go to protect the most vulnerable. That made sense to make sure that personal care homes and others are out there. Where we've wanted governments to go, and it seems like they're finally getting there, is to vaccinate people who are still working. And that's what's going to cut COVID. It's important, of course, to vaccinate the people who are in the seniors' homes to ensure that they don't die from COVID. Absolutely. But if we want to cut the spread of COVID, we got to get vaccines into the working population, the people that are out there in jobs in essential industries right now. And it looks like governments are starting to do more of that. I have been encouraged to see that they've been rolling out vaccines to younger populations and
Yeah.
doing clinics now at plants and others where workers are. I think that, look, we're on my optimistic days. I look at what's happening what has happened in the UK. Not a single COVID death one day this week.
Yeah.
In the US, COVID numbers dropping like a stone because of their higher vaccination rates. And we should be. I mean, we have to be fair to the governments. We have actually seen a huge uptick in vaccination volumes with the first dose. I'm worried, like everyone, that the first dose is not going to be enough. But if it at least allows us to bring those levels down while we then complete the process for the majority of Canadians, that should allow us to get the economy back open. I'm hoping that the restrictions can be lifted as vaccination rates increase. And I will say a huge compliment to Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. Saskatchewan is the first and to date the only province that has actually put some milestones out there on the reopening of its economy based on the percentage of certain populations being vaccinated. This is a recipe I hope that Alberta Premier Kenney and other premiers across Canada emulate to stage out a vaccination plan linked to opening up of the economy. To me, that also provides incentives for Canadians to say, you know what, I'm a little hesitant, but I also want to get out of my bloody basement. This is going to help me do that.
Yeah, so we're looking, from the vaccination point of view, we're looking, September, fall, when a lot of the second doses even are in place. That's still, what, 3 months or so away. Can a lot of these businesses hold on for another 3 months?
No, they sure can't, and that's why we can't wait. And this, there are some proponents in the health industries that are suggesting that we go to COVID zero, and that until this is ground down to next to nothing, we have to basically stay locked down
Yeah.
and hiding in our homes. We can't afford to do that. I mean, there's not enough money that the government of Canada can print to try to support everyone until that happens. We've got to get the economy open. I'm hoping that the COVID numbers will fall. And look, we've seen this movie before a few times where, yes, there's been an uptick, but there also the ramp down can happen fairly quickly too. And I'm optimistic now that we've got enough people vaccinated. This has been this should be the game changer. What I'm really also hoping is that governments can begin to get rapid testing out in larger numbers in employment settings as an alternative to lockdowns. We're going to have to live with COVID for some time.
Yeah.
But if we rapid test employees, we say to the hair salon, you can open, but you got to rapid test your employees 3 times a week to make sure that they're not carrying asymptomatically, that they're not carrying COVID. That to me is the recipe out of this over the next number of months, until such time as vaccination rates with second doses are high enough that we can remove, we hope permanently, all of the restrictions on physical, that require physical distancing. Rapid testing can be that midterm strategy, getting us out of this horrible, horrible environment that is literally killing more business owners every single day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks a lot, Dan, for joining us today.
Anytime.
All right, that was Dan Kelly, President, CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business. Thanks for joining us today.